Hey everybody, welcome back to Cone's Garage. Today we're going to see where we stand on the rust repair of the Mark II Supra. Very funny. But on today's agenda, we're going to take care of the rust in the rear quarters and the rocker panels. We got two rear quarters that are not looking too good. Before we start to fix this, we need to clear this area out of all of the not metal things so we can work on the metal things. You're going to need to take this wheel off really just to get to the fender. Fortunately I don't have my big breaker bar with me. So as always we start with using the wrong tool for the job. It's like an industry standard for me now. Oh, it's always the last one, isn't it? Alright, and that should only have taken about 5 years off my bag's lifespan. With the jack, in with the jack stand. Okay, what do we have in here? Well, a couple things. There's a couple things to note in here. So we had a really bad rear brake noise. I'm probably going to take a look at that today, see what was going on. But really what we're trying to do here is get these rear fender, like the wide body fenders off. This is what makes this car in particular a little bit more special than some Celica Supras, is that it has these fender extensions as a factory option. So first off, we have these super cool mud flaps that are on here. Little deck-a-deck action, and release the shmoo. Off it comes. Yeah, super simple and completely rubber, so no rust. Unbelievable. I'm going to set these screws back in the flare because the flare is coming off. How do the actual flares come off? There's a bolt there. There is a bolt there. Okay, so it seems like it's metal fasteners, which is surprising. Really got to be careful with these, though. These are a precious commodity. Certainly not something easily replaceable. Some of them are nuts on threads, and some of them are like that sheet metal screw style. Interesting. Some of these are covered in so much road grime I can't even actually get to the heads of the screws. I'm just going to take one of these little brushes for my impact and run them along there and get out some of the shmoo. Off it comes. Easy as that. Wow, label me impressed. So, here's the thing. You might think that the P-types are actually just the regular cars with fender flares on them. But it is actually finished very differently. This is not a normal fender on the car. This would be typically rolled over and rolled back to itself. But this is actually just a panel and an inner panel glued together with a seam, so you could not run this car without these fender flares. Amazingly, and kind of showing the way this car was weather damaged, there's no rust anywhere under the flare in this area where you would expect. All of the rust that is gathered on this car is at the bottom of the car where water would sit because the drains were clogged. So I'm really thinking this is not damage due to road salt or, you know, any kind of corrosion like that. This is damage done by the car sitting in the weather under trees and debris, causing the water to get trapped in the body. So it rusted inside out, basically. It is what it is. But on this side, it seems like we're solid up to this body line. So we might just need to cut to here, across here, down here. I see a little bit right there too. So it may need to go all the way back to this corner. That's fine. Now what I don't want to do is remove the rear bumper. That would be a lot of work, and I just don't want to go there if I don't have to. We'll see. I know it was hard to see what this looked like before, but it's much worse than it looked like before. So we have ourselves here a proper little conundrum. So it's not only the outside that is rusted, there's actually rust and a hole on the inside as well. The good news is everything around here is pretty thick metal, much thicker than what I was working with over there. The bad news is I have no idea how I'm going to access this back piece. So it just needs to be straight down to make a lip, and the other piece will make a lip on top of it, and those two will get welded together here. How I'm going to do that? I don't know yet. Still working on it. The classic look of, well, that's something. So what we have here is basically the piece we need minus the bottom lip. I've not decided if I'm going to do the bottom lip yet or not. I could weld it right at the seam, or I could do it a whole piece all the way down. If it stacks on top of this and doubles up, I'm not worried about that. Wait. I want everybody to see this. I'm using the angle grinder with the guard on. Don't get used to it. This really is a tricky situation for me. I would really like to have this patched in very seamlessly and right in with the original metal. It's very hard to do that, I'm finding, with either my quality of welder or just the quality of metal on the car. As the welds just don't like to... They'll weld to the new metal fine, but the old metal it just likes to burn through, even on the lowest settings. So what I'm ending up doing is cutting the patch to the same side, and then reinforcing it with more metal behind the patch. Bit ahead of myself there, because I do still need to bend and crease this piece to match the profile of the fender. Of which, of course, I'm doing with a vise and 2 pieces of 1x4. These are my first preliminary bends, and what I was doing was just measuring down from the top to where the bend is, and then from the bend in, and from the bend down. I had audio of all this, but for some reason I decided to leave the fan going behind me so you couldn't hear any of it. But for the first take of these bends, I'm really impressed with how it matched up, and is really more than good to start welding it and tacking it in place, because once it's tacked in place, you can really hammer it and move it around a bit more without worrying about distorting it. I managed not to get any of this on video, but behind this patch panel there is another piece of metal that I have tacked in place along 3 sides of the edge, and that's to give me a little bit more to weld to. It's not really necessarily the best way to do that because it creates an area where water can collect in the future, but it was the only way that I could do it with the tools and skill that I have. After spot welding around the edges, it's time for the most important weld quality test. Sounds good. Just got to trim off the bottom and it's ready for filler and to be painted over. And now to jump back to something we hadn't quite finished last time, and that is the repair of the quarter window. I went ahead and did the body work there, filled it, smoothed it, sanded it, painted it, good to go. Now all we need to do is reinstall the window, which is something I've never done before. But I did some research, found that this 3M urethane adhesive is the best thing for it. A little bit different than the foam adhesive that it had before, but hopefully it actually seals it a little bit better. And we're going to lay a bead around the edge of the quarter window, put it in place, and then the existing hardware should hold it in place and hold it up there tight enough that we basically don't have to worry about it. This little piece of trim on the back quarter of the window is the only thing that actually aligns this window with the body. There is a hole through the glass, and then the stud of this piece of trim goes through it, which is actually nice because it helped locate this whole thing and made it pretty easy. Don't panic, that's the body I'm hitting, not the piece of glass. It sounds real bad in video though, as I note now. So remember the hardware I talked about before that holds the window in place? Turns out that those don't quite push against the glass very tightly, probably since the layer of adhesive I laid is not as tall as the foam adhesive that it used to have. Not a big deal, I just used some cardboard and a couple little pieces of shims, metal shims to put in between them. That way, as the glass adhesive is setting, it's pressed up there nice and tight, there shouldn't be any gaps. We don't want any water gaps, and I'm actually going to run a bead along the metal and glass there as well to try and prevent water from running down in the future. After some gratuitous use of filler and primer and sanding and primer and sanding and primer and sanding, that is actually a wrap on the rust repair for the driver's side of the car. Only the passenger side left to go, which is technically the worst side, but after doing it once, it should be pretty simple doing it on the other side. Pretty much the same pieces needed on the opposite side, just a little bit more in the rocker. And now if we go ahead and look at the other side, this is the side with the fuel door. There's a lot of rust underneath the fuel door, but it's actually not rusted through, so I'm just going to patch that so I don't weld right next to the fuel filler neck. And then the bottom is pretty much the same as the other side. The big spot on this side was actually in the rocker where there was a sandcastle. Went ahead and fired it up and turned it around in the garage so that I could work on the other side to finish out the bodywork. Well, I'm basically done. No more welding is needed. Everything is ready for final sanding and that kind of stuff. Next time we can try and figure out kind of what's going on. It's got a little bit of an idle issue, and most importantly, what we can do is start taking all of this stuff out of the bed of the pickup of the Datsun and putting it back in the Supra. Getting everything back on, the hood, the hatch, the moonroof, everything. Gonna try and make this a whole car again next time, because it seems like we're at that point. As a novice at the welding and bodywork side of things, it's been difficult to get good video of this process, but I do hope you have enjoyed. But now we can move on to, like I said, getting the car back together and doing some fun stuff again, maybe doing some modification and trying to get the thing on the road. Thank you all for your support of Cone's Garage and the Project Mark II Supra, and I look forward to seeing you next time.